Hey everyone, welcome back to Horse 2 Cinema. I know it's been a couple weeks since my last upload, but I was busy finishing up the semester of school, and then I had a trip with my girlfriend when she came to visit me, and I had to go back to the US, so I've had a long couple weeks, but now I'm finally ready to get back and start reviewing some more movies. And today I'm going to be reviewing Everything Everywhere All at Once, which came out this year, and it was directed by the film duo Daniels. So, I finally saw it. This movie came out in the US, I think like 2 months ago, but I couldn't see it until now because I go to university in another country. Funny enough, it was actually released in Ireland where I go to university about, I think, on May 13th, thereabouts. But the thing is, like, I was on a trip with my girlfriend somewhere else during that time, so I even when I went back to Ireland for like another day, I just didn't have time to go back and see it. So now I finally just got a chance. But during these last 2 months, my expectations for it have kind of like fluctuated really rapidly. On one hand, it's the Daniels, whose first film, Swiss Army Man, I really do like. I thought that was one of the more original films I've ever seen. I think it's kind of hard to dispute that. Whether or not the film works by itself, I think it largely works for me, but there certainly are flaws that you can point out as well in terms of the story lacking like a fully cohesive emotional core. But regardless, I love that movie, so I was very excited for this one. And then it came out and it started actually to get a lot of acclaim. Like, it became the highest rated film of all time on Letterboxd, which I still think is pretty absurd. And naturally, I just became really skeptical after that. I thought it would be one of those situations where you put your expectations way too high, and then you're disappointed as a result when you actually see the film. And then people I trust, and especially when it comes to their opinions on films, they started to see it and they would basically say the same thing, that it's unbelievable, you have to see this. But I still remained a bit skeptical. I think sometimes hype can certainly influence people's reactions to things, and so I just wasn't sure if maybe that was clouding collective judgment or whatever. And I kind of figured that when I finally went to see Everything Everywhere All at Once, I would maybe have a similar reaction that I did to Robert Eggers' The Northman, which I reviewed a while ago. I really like that film, but for me, it's easily probably Eggers' worst film of the three he's done. And overall, there's problems with it, and and I just sort of I was disappointed by some little areas. I got into the exact details of that in the review, but yeah, in general, I wanted a little bit more from it than I got, and that's kind of how I figured my reaction to this would be. But I was wrong. I was really wrong. This turned out not only to meet, but to surpass my expectations, and I think so far it's my favorite film of the year. So in terms of the plot, I'm just gonna read the Letterboxd plot description, because I think to try and delve too much into it would really be hard to do without getting into spoilers. It is a very, very large and ambitious movie. The plot is that an aging Chinese immigrant is swept up into an insane adventure where she alone can save what's important to her by connecting with the lives that she could have led in other universes. So yeah, it's a multiverse movie, and the basic idea is that there's a threat to the multiverse, that this character Evelyn and Evelyn alone can save the multiverse. And that's an idea that we've seen a lot in multiverse movies, where you have like this chosen one character where they're the only ones that can save everything. But I think what's really smart about it here is that it isn't literal, and the entire multiverse idea isn't literal. The reason that only she can, deal with this plot isn't because of some vague, hero's journey, chosen one kind of thing. Without getting too heavy into spoilers, it's because of the emotional connection with that this character has with her daughter. And even the universes within the multiverse themselves are really emotional, because they all have to do with different lives that this character Evelyn could have led in other alternate timelines. So let's start talking about the technical elements of this just a little bit. As someone who, really likes movies like House, the 1970s Japanese horror surrealist movie, as well as stuff by Gaspar Noé like Enter the Void, I enjoy a really good visual spectacle as much as anybody else, but there's not much you can show me that I haven't already seen in some form, or at least something like it. But I was completely flabbergasted by what a unique movie this was, and just how unique the aesthetic was overall. It's like nothing I've ever seen, and I don't say that lightly. The trailers have sequences in which Michelle Yeoh's character is, flying through an office building on a desk chair, and she's being pulled that way by the multiverse, and then she's just sort of starts flying between different universes, etc. But it gets way crazier than that. There were a lot of moments actually that legitimately reminded me of Enter the Void, if I had to compare it to anything, which again, it's really hard to compare the aesthetic to, and I'll talk about why in a minute. But yeah, I mean, there were a lot of the colors, for example, in many sequences are just, they seem like it's just it's a kaleidoscope or something. It's just completely dazzling, and it's often sprinkled in with strobe lights, which is a thing that you see a lot of in Enter the Void. But outside of, you know, sort of the Enter the Void comparisons, I mean, again, it's just so unique. Similar to the Daniels' first movie, Swiss Army Man, it's just so fucking creative. The visual humor that went into certain set pieces is just, that, I think that's really what sets the Daniels apart as directors. They're able to create comedy in such a bizarre way, but in something, oddly enough, it appears to be fairly universal. I mean, the theater was just dying with laughter in these sequences. And there's just so many visual ideas throughout that I looked at and I just thought, how has nobody thought of this before? One in particular, I guess all I'm going to say about it is that it involves rocks. And if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about, but that is such a fucking great idea, and I don't know why nobody's ever done it before. At least nobody that I've seen. Maybe somebody else has thought of that, I don't know. The film is definitely trying to mix a bunch of different genres into one thing, and one way you can clearly see that is it's very influenced by martial arts movies. And those martial arts sequences I think are really incredible, and I think it really just comes down to the casting. I mean, Michelle Yeoh, in her work on movies like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and a bunch of other things is you know, it's perfect for something like this. And I am just stoked that they brought back, I think his name is Ke Huy Quan, maybe I'm mispronouncing that, but he played Short Round in Temple of Doom, one of my favorite movies ever. He is just unbelievable. I was so happy to see him make a return to acting after, I think, like maybe 30 years of not really being in anything. Yeah, he's just great. Aesthetically, the movie's also a treat for the ears, not just the eyes. It has a really wild sound design to it, naturally, since it's a multiverse movie with a lot of fight sequences and stuff like that. But it's also, the score is just brilliant for this. The score is by Son Lux, and what's interesting about it is that I kind of barely noticed it during the movie, because to me it just kind of seamlessly blended with the sound design and just with the visual spectacle of everything. You kind of feel like Michelle Yeoh's character being pulled through these sequences of events, and I think the sound design in the score is kind of integral in that idea. And so you don't really notice it, at least I didn't. My friend Jackie, who had seen it, she's a film score major, so she noticed it, I think, a lot more than I did. But yeah, I thought it was just fantastic. I've subsequently listened to it just on its own, and it really makes me feel like I'm still in the theater. It takes me back to very specific moments in the film. Overall, with just, again, the aesthetic of it, I think probably the best thing I can say about it is that I can't believe that this cost $25 million to make, this film. It costs like legitimately an eighth of what Marvel movies cost, yet it looks better, and as I'll get to, it's more creative with the multiverse idea. It's just a lot more emotionally engaging. So despite all this, you know, flash that I'm talking about with the visual and audio aesthetic, I was kind of worried that maybe this film would just be style over substance, which can be fine. There's certainly movies that I really like that I would probably say are style over substance, but that doesn't take away from how much I enjoy them. But I think we'd all agree that it's better if you have a movie with a really unique, effective style that also has a nice, meaty story with good themes and stuff to go with it. And once again, I was just wrong about that. The mother-daughter relationship is just so emotionally resonant and surprisingly nuanced, actually. Their confrontation at the end of the film kind of went in a direction that I wasn't really expecting. There's a moment when they're talking to each other and you kind of think that Evelyn has said the right thing, the thing that she needs to say in order to kind of solve the whole issue between them. But then you realize that that's totally not the case. She hasn't said that at all, and what she said isn't exactly very genuine. But there's a further step beyond that in the conversation that really gets to that genuine place, the heart of what these characters really need from each other. And I don't know if this was just my screening, but I could hear a lot of people around me crying. I'm not an easy crier in movies, but I went to see this with my parents and my mom was just weeping. Yeah, I mean, it really is quite emotional. And again, it's such a good way of using the multiverse concept purposefully. Now, I'm not gonna say this film is completely, you know, it's just a work of unique genius, like it just comes out of nowhere. I think obviously a lot of people have pointed out that it owes a lot to Matrix, and I would say that's very true. But I think just even more so than Matrix, I think it incorporates a lot of these ideas that can kind of be explored in the sort of simulated universe, multiverse idea really, really well, possibly even better than The Matrix. It feels like when they use the multiverse idea in Marvel movies, for example, they're trying to plug sequels, or they're trying to bring a lot of characters together in movies like The Avengers, where, you know, they can just sort of use those characters, you know, the idea of them all being in one movie to sort of advertise for it and make a lot more money. And there's obviously something that feels very disingenuous about that for me. But in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, it really feels genuine. And it's not just about the relationship between these two people, it is very existential. It uses this multiverse idea to explore our beautiful yet very insignificant existence in this vast universe or multiverse. Again, through that idea that every decision you make influences a possible another universe in which you could have done something else. But then they, you know, there's this idea of how much does that idea really matter in terms of, because you can only exist in one universe, so isn't the best thing just to connect with the people around you? And I think the best part about, you know, this movie and all these ideas is that I don't think I quite understand everything that the movie is trying to say yet. I think it's mostly the really rapid way that this movie is edited together, where they kind of are intercutting between a lot of different sequences, that makes the movie a little bit overwhelming on the first viewing. And I imagine that if I were to revisit it again, I think I would find these ideas a lot more meaty and in depth than I even found them on the first viewing. It's a movie that demands multiple viewings, which is something that is very, very refreshing for a multiverse movie. It's not simple at all. It is very complex. Now, is this a flawless film? I think it depends what you mean by flawless. When I was watching it, I did think at times that it was a little bit overly expository, especially with Ke Huy Quan's character, who's kind of explaining the multiverse to Evelyn. They make a bunch of movie references in the film, especially to movies like 2001 and others. And are those references a tad on the nose at some time? Yeah, probably. But does any of that matter? Not for me. I don't think so. Nothing that's wrong with this film actually takes away from the experience. The exposition is a little bit heavy, but it didn't bog it down for me. I didn't really find myself bored or, you know, finding it hard to concentrate on the film. I think you can nitpick this film to death, but there's no getting around the fact that it's one of the most original, you know, innovative, wild movies, not just of the year, but of the last several years, maybe of all time. It's very quickly one of my favorite films of not only the year, but the decade. And of course, I'm gonna give this 5 out of 5 stars. I highly recommend this more than just about anything else I've seen this year. So yeah, I finally saw it, finally reviewed it. Can check this one off the list. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, you can like it down below and subscribe to the channel if you want. I've got more content, more reviews coming up. Hopefully gonna get to Vortex, the new Gaspar Noé movie, as well as Alex Garland's Men, Top Gun Mavericks coming up. So a lot of good stuff coming up soon, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.